1,400 years, heresy sown. Truth was twisted, its seeds were grown. Break the lies, spark the mission. Welcome to Quranic Inquisition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Peace of the Lord to all of you. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, namaste. Welcome to the show. So today we are going to have a look at part 2 of the conversation that I had with Lloyd and Odon about a year ago, where we were just discussing the origins of Islam, or rather some of the stories that appear on different characters that seem to have made their way into the canon of Muhammad, or at least they are very strong contenders for that. As we figure out more and more of what happened 1400 years ago, these little pieces of the jigsaw might actually give us clear understanding of what happened. So it is a matter of just putting all of this information out there. Some of them might be nothing but coincidences, some might be fabrications, but some might actually be right on the money, and it will help us a lot. Okay, so we're going to actually discuss some very interesting characters whose stories they are actually then found in Muhammad's own stories. So we have these parallel stories between someone and then Muhammad. So maybe a coincidence, or maybe the original guys, the other guys did exist and did do those things. And then the stories got repurposed into the canon of Muhammad. From those characters, one of the most interesting ones is Salman al-Farisi. Even according to the Islamic sources, he is one of the most mysterious characters in Islamic lore. He's actually quite important in Shia Islam somehow. But that character has a lot of value and importance. In fact, he's the one who is meant to have said that Muhammad was a prophet because he saw the signs and stuff. So it's a very interesting character. We're going to go through him, his stories, and stories that seem to have actually made it even into the Quran. And the other character is Umar, who is a very strong candidate for being the actual inspiration of Muhammad, as you are going to see in a minute. So I hope you enjoy. I will see you at the end. So should we go with one of the big names and see what we find and where we find him? Mr. Salman al-Farisi. So this guy, he appears in the Life of Muhammad. Anyone who hasn't actually read
just
that,
hold on a second. I just realized what my point was.
Yeah.
Apologies for the interruption.
No. Go.
When I did my talks on St. Paul, on the Muslim hatred of St. Paul, as well as their claims of tahrif, which is the corruption of the Bible, looking at the two different versions of scholarship, where the one is saying, no, the Bible was physically edited, the words were physically changed and rewritten. The other one is that the Bible has simply been misunderstood or misinterpreted. What seems evident to me is that the reaction to the Bible being rewritten seems to happen somewhere in the late 9th century, some in the 9th century, approximately around the time that they invaded Spain. So they've already invaded Spain, they've conquered Spain, and at some point, it appears that one of the scholars bothers to take the time to actually pick up and read a Bible. They finally have access to a full Bible, they read it, and they go, oops, nothing in the Quran matches anything in this gospel, in this New Testament. Therefore, they start making accusations that the gospel was rewritten because it contradicts every story in the Quran. So that's what I took away from my research on the whole tahrif story related to St. Paul. So they did not have a full Bible at the time. And so a lot of these things are very late. They add them later, and then they have to change the story. They have to come up with an excuse because they paint themselves into a corner.
I think that might have been, I think I read that one a long time ago. I think it was Ibn Hassam, the one that actually reads that and says, no, they're corrupt, something like that. Yeah.
There's another thing about these tariff accusations. Actually, I think it also refers to the Quran itself and the Islamic reading of the Quran. In the Quran, there are accusations of tariff against the people of the book. They are supposed to have written the Holy Scriptures by themselves or to have distorted them. And so when the Quran was declared the divine word, they had to abide by the Quran. So they were constrained by their own interpretation of the Quran, and they had to invent these accusations. Actually, these accusations of falsification of tarif in the literal Quran, they don't refer to the Bible or to Christians. They refer to rabbinic Jews forging the Talmuds, or rabbinic Jews editing the prophecies about the coming of Jesus as the Messiah of Israel. But this actual history could not exist in the Islamic narrative. And so they had to invent and build upon their inventions. This is the way they fabricated the whole of the Islamic narrative. And so they invented stories upon stories upon stories, and they tried to take everything they could use to justify their own view, their own interpretation of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like what you said before, that Islam was kind of built of contradictions on top of contradictions, and it's like this. Is like they create something and then they create more things, and then there are more plot holes. So they create things to cover those plot holes, and then they have more plot holes, and and then you end up with the Islam that we know today, right?
Think of what they say about Mary in the Quran, right? There's 5 statements about Mary that are not in the Gospels. And thanks to Mackay John Kenneth for adding this in my comment section. There are 5 statements that are not in the Gospels, but in the infancy Gospel of Thomas and the Proto-Evangelium of James. Right? So this is Mary went under the tree. She sat under the tree. She shook the tree, and dates. Jesus spoke in the cradle. Jesus molded birds and breathed life into them, and they flew, which paints Jesus as a very evil, nasty character. And daughter of Imran. So these are all, none of these are from actual Christian sources. They clearly didn't have access to those. They thought those were Christian. Thank you very much for that donation.
Should I continue with the presentation?
Thanks.
Yep. Right. So Salman, let's look at one of the big ones. So he appears in the life of Muhammad, which of course was compiled by just taking lots of things. It's about 2, maybe 3 pages. So anybody who who's interested in this and wants to actually pin things on Salman, go and read it. It's really a 10-minute read, and that's pretty much just what it says. In short, this is what happens. So this guy is in Isfahan in Iran, and then he goes to Syria, meets a monk who is horrible. That monk dies. Then another one takes over who is very good, and he dies. And then he's moving to another monk who dies, and then he goes to another monk who says, "Hey, go to Arabia, go find him. Go to Arabia and go find the prophet because he's about to appear." And then the guy dies. So this guy is very much linked to the whole idea of Muhammad being a prophet, pretty much because he gave him food and the prophet didn't eat. I'm making a very long story short, but it's right there in the life of Muhammad. The story of Muhammad, or the story of a prophet, is linked to this guy. The stories were not written for 300 years. That's how I think they started to separate one and the other. And by the way, that message there is kind of like weird. So for hundreds of years, they remembered this guy saying that his daddy loved him more than the whole world. Like, Salman, nobody cares that you didn't have daddy issues. That should be the norm. But that is actually written hundreds of years later. We will see if we can find that same thing somewhere else, because the same story then goes to 2 different individuals. And that actually happens quite a bit. There is this weird story as well, where Salman says to the prophet who never existed that there is in this place where sick people go once a year, and then someone prays for them, and then they get healed. And then the prophet who never existed said to Salman, "Oh, then you met Jesus, the son of Mary." And he's like, "Well, guys, we were just talking about plot holes. If Jesus, the son of Mary, the Messiah, is coming down to earth once a year to heal the sick, just go and ask him for the revelations. Why do you go to Momo?
It's like it's just silly. But that is in the life of Muhammad. So
Right.
how? And this is
Just a
a
brief
little bit our
question.
story. Yep.
So there's a question from, I think it's Rane Shustic. I hope I pronounced that. It said, how many layers in the creation of Islam? I mean, that's a really difficult question to understand the question, never mind the answer. I mean, there's going to be a religious layer. There's going to be a legislative layer. There will be a narrative layer. There's going to be also, there's the divisions that Islam has broken into. There's going to be a level of understanding for the layman, for the imam, for the higher level of imam, and for the Sufis. So it's a fairly, at least 4 layers, 4 levels, but of understanding. But then there's also it's a soup. It's hard to. How would you answer this briefly, Odon?
It's very. I couldn't answer such a question because there are hundreds of stories that were built upon stories and stories and stories. If you take John of Damascus' testimony, during his time, there was a vague belief that there was someone who founded or created the Ishmaelite movement. So let's call him Mahmad. But he did not receive the revelation by an angel. He received it during his sleep. So we are here at a sort of early stage of building Islam. So there is this layer, for example, he received the revelation during his sleep. Thereafter came another layer. The angel Gabriel gave him the revelation. So it's another layer. And there was another layer thereafter. He went to the heavens and God presented him the celestial Quran, the mother of scripture. So another layer of revelation. And so on and so on. And
we have to figure out what was backdated from the future to the past to try and give it legitimacy. And then you have different periods of editing and different geographies. It's a really tough question, but clearly there was a lot of work that went into this over centuries. Would you agree?
Centuries of work, fabrications, inventions, forgeries, editings. So one cannot answer the question of the number of layers.
Yeah, and the Islam definitely continues to evolve. The Sirah evolve all the time. The understanding of Islam adjusts to fit the culture, although the Sharia doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
But JC, your thoughts on this? I mean, you're an author, so from a narrative point of view, there must be multiple layers.
Yeah, well, we could actually talk about it for days, probably, just because it does look almost like they are very almost reactive. There is a problem, and then they come up with something else, and then they do something else, and then no, pray more, and now tell yourself, don't have any doubts, that's haram, and then do this, and then they are changing things. And the game of Islam is almost like try to just keep people moving forward, because if at any point anyone stops and looks at the mess, they're going to realize that we are lying to them. So we have to keep lying to them, putting more things so that they never get to the end of the lies, and everything just continues. And things like the stories, the Mirage not only was not invented at that point, it was not invented. That happened. I have no idea when the concept of the Mirage happened, but we discussed that one, Lloyd, on the previous time.
Pre-existent in Zoroastrianism, and they could have borrowed it and just modified it.
Yeah, but the Quran, that verse, I think is Surah 17, verse 1, about the night journey, that is actually talking about Moses. And I got that from the Christian prince, and it is spot on. But also that surah used to be called Bani Israel. So if you read that, and you know that the title is Bani Israel, you get to the very first verse, you know that that is talking basically about the Exodus.
Well, the first references to the Burak in the Islamic sources are to Abraham, not to Muhammad. And in fact, the Burak comes up in reference to a poem, right? This poem apparently written like 150 years after Muhammad dies. And it's a poem about how Abraham travels, and the Muslims borrowed that because they were being asked, how in the heck does Muhammad or does Abraham travel between Beersheba, where he lives, or Bethel, and Mecca. How the heck does he get there in a day and back? And so they took this idea of a poem, and then they suddenly created the Burak. So, wow, thank you, Frane Sustic, for $5. Let's see what they say. I'm talking about layers as in editors. Would it be something like Muhammad plus early editors, Umayyad layer, Abbasid editors, Ottomans? Okay, from that perspective, we can be more specific. So analysis done on the Quran tells us you've got at least 200 years, I'd say 200 years of editing that went into it, and anything from a couple of dozen major authors. So you're looking at anything up to 100, but at minimum, you're looking at a couple of dozen, say 30, as one analysis did. If you analyze the text, the words, the structure, the way of writing, you can find 30 different authors, different geographies over a 200-year period. Odon, your thoughts on that?
This is a discussion we had. It's about the Jean-Jacques Walter thesis. But I told you at the time that his hypothesis about the 200 years span of writing for the Quran, I think it's a flawed hypothesis, because it relies on another hypothesis, which is that the word cool, that we find in some verses, the beginning of verses, were added when or just after the Quran was declared as the divine word, as the word of God. Because otherwise, without those words, without those say prophet, do this, say this, do that, some of the verses could obviously not be understood as God's word or God's commandments.
Right. And also chronologically, my final point here is that you're looking at probably a Christian lectionary section, or as a substrate, which seems to be Aramaic or Syriac rather. Then you've got some kind of
really.
That's
You're thinking about the lectionary.
That's what. That's what. No, not get Kuhn. That's what the guy who speaks about the Aramaic in the Quran. Christoph Luxemburg. He mentions the lectionary, I believe.
Yeah, he mentions it, but that's the Quran is nothing like a lectionary.
Yeah, but originally the underlying Arabic layer seems to have been derived from a lectionary, and then somehow magically abracadabra gets transformed into something else, into bad Arabic, and then
should it be so? Everything from the original lectionary has been replaced. So
yeah,
it's like
there's enough Aramaisms left in it to tell you it came from a Christian source. Well, that seems to be what some scholars think, and then you've got these Arabic layers, and it transforms a handful of times.
Yeah. So there's a thing about such things in French when we refer to a knife without a blade, out of which the handle has been taken off. So is it still a knife?
True. I mean, but it had to start somewhere, and it seems to be. Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, but
I think the starting point was the preacher's notes. There were preachers preaching in Arabia. They took notes for their preaching, for their. They also had instructors, teachers teaching them what to preach, and this was the material, the raw material out of which the Quran was edited and fabricated.
But then that makes it similar, in my mind, to the Didache. It's a similar instruction manual. So what if this was a rival to the Didache? They took
this
the
is
Didache
nothing like a lectionary.
Say again?
This is nothing like a lectionary. We have this false idea of the Quran being a lectionary because the word Quran means lectionary.
I blame the scholars for that, Odon. I blame these PhD scholars in academia who have millions of dollars of funding. I do not blame myself here. That's what they told me.
That's a thing. There is a very simple things to help make the difference, to help understand what the Quran is about. If you read the text, the Quran, it speaks about a book which is named Quran, which is supposed to be written in a clear and understandable Arabic. But if you look at the Quran, it's not written in a clear and understandable Arabic. So when you come across a verse referring a book written in clear and in a clear Arabic language, it cannot be the Quran. It must be another book.
Right. We're hijacking JC's thesis here. JC,
JC,
your thoughts on this? I mean, these are I mean, real questions that we have. I mean, we're trying to get to these answers. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I saw that your 200-year span of writing the Quran, and I'm going to raise you to about 1,300 years because the Quran was not really finalized until 1985. But jokes aside,
that's true.
There are yeah. So, but yes, we know that it's particularly once we actually get to the Ottomans, they did things. But when we look at the Quran, it makes no sense. It has no order. It has different grammar, different everything. So it does look almost like somebody just going around and taking pieces of things that people had been writing.
Also, a lot of it was edited by people who did not speak first language native Arabic. A lot of those people who spoke very bad Arabic. If you have the Quran from Saint Murad and you read it, it makes no sense half the time. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. So when you read it, and the English is supposed to be an accurate representation of the Arabic, which tells you the Arabic is just incomprehensible, which means he says it is grammatically broken. The diction is completely just random, and Christian Prince says the same. It is a completely illegible, completely irrational, just totally incomprehensible book. He says it makes no sense. So, I mean, but in that sense, we now can understand if the English is accurate to the Arabic, that it makes no sense at all. It's just, and that's why it had to have a narrative placed on top of it to try and make sense of the garbage that it is.
Well, I think it's probably on the next slide. I have one extract to do with Salman, and then a little bit later on, I have something about Umar. So maybe when we see those and how they are actually written, maybe we can actually say, okay, fine, so these things would be written here or there or in this manner, and for what reason. And actually I have as well one extract, a little piece from the book from Saint Murad. So because it's very important, and maybe that gives us a little bit more context. But I think that's actually on the next slide. So if we can actually have a look at that one and then we discuss it, that'd be great. So very briefly about the storytelling, because we said that this guy was very much connected to the whole thing of prophethood. So we have the same story. I wrote down first person. I wrote down first person and third person is, well, two different individuals. On the one hand, Muhammad goes to Syria, he meets a monk, and he says, "You're a prophet." On the third person is Salman goes to Syria, he meets a monk, and he says, "You're going to find a prophet." You can see that whatever story was actually being told to begin with, it evolved into two different people. They're both linked to Syria, both linked to a Christian monk. But that actually, and yes, I'm going to address this, which is what we started discussing before the show, which is it doesn't actually make any sense that this Salman guy would actually ever speak with a Christian of any denomination and saying there is going to be a prophet. If they were Christians, they would never say that. They would say 666 years since the death and resurrection of Jesus, the Antichrist is coming, go find him, kill him. Because no one would say, no Christian of any kind would say somebody else is coming. However, if he was talking with a Jew, they would have said, look, we had a Muhammad and he didn't build the temple. And then we had another Muhammad and he didn't build the temple. Any moment now, we're going to have a Muhammad and he's going to build the temple. So I think those stories would have come a little bit something to do with this guy, Jewish influence, the title of Muhammad, being expelled from Jerusalem, going back, conquering Jerusalem, which is in the end Umar, and all of that. That story of the Muhammad is obviously Jewish. So this guy getting the information about a prophet from a Christian is a big no-no. Maybe a Jew, definitely not a Christian. Would you guys agree with that?
I partly get the impression that this might also be an effort to delegitimize Christianity to make it a transitional religion, so that we end up with, because a Christian says, well, okay, actually the real religion, and that's coming with this Momo guy that's going to be born in like a year or two. In fact, there he is on a camel coming down the street in Syria. So
there's really something going on with this Salman al-Farisi character. You see, he's supposed to have converted to Christianity according to the Islamic narrative, but it's not Christianity literally. Literally, it's Nazarenism. He became a Nazarene. Nazarene are Jews, actually. They are not Christians. And they were settled in Syria. The story about meeting a monk. The monk name is Bahira. Bahira in Aramaic, it means teacher. He meets a teacher who tells him about prophecy and so on. If you look in the Islamic narrative, you have other characters, other figures such as Salman al-Farisi. You have Waraka bin Naufal. He was a Jew who supposedly converted to Christianity. He was a Christian in Mecca, in pagan Mecca, which is utter nonsense. And it's the same. It's a guy, a Jew, who converted to Nazarenism. Nazarenism is this very strange Jewish group who believed in Jesus' messiahship, but opposed Christianity because he did not believe he was God.
So he didn't believe in his divinity nor the Trinity.
Yeah, no Trinity. Jesus was only a man whom God had given power, and maybe the power to rebuild the temple. Let's not forget about Jesus' prophecy in the gospel. Jesus said that should you destroy the temple, I will rebuild it in 3 days. So he is a Mahmad in the Jewish meaning of the expression, because he's supposed to rebuild the temple. He is the one who, at the end of times, will rebuild the temple. So he's another very strong candidate for those who are waiting for a Mahmad to rebuild the temple. So, of course, he won't be a candidate for rabbinic Jews. But for some Jews who believed he was the Messiah, it might fit.
Well, the Jews were waiting for the Mahmad to rebuild the temple, and that did happen, and it didn't really go too well for them. So,
go according to plan.
So, this guy then, was it Salman? We have this story as well from, I suppose that one is the life of Muhammad. So it says that this guy we're going to basically find him now in the Quran. So this guy goes to works for a bishop. He says, hey, I want to serve under you. That guy is a bad man. He describes him as such. He asks for alms, and then he puts him in his own coffers. And it says, and he did not give to the poor. He had collected 7 jars of gold and silver. So that is recorded after hundreds of years. People are still telling about these stories that are being told about this guy. It doesn't really matter if they are true or false, but they're telling the stories, and we're going to see now one of these splits. By the way, this one, which I don't think has relevance, but I will just mention it, that it says that when that guy died, the bad bishop, he told people, hey, this guy has been stealing from you. And then they took the corpse of that guy and they crucified him, even though the guy was already dead, which, these people actually hold a grudge. But I did actually wonder whether that whole thing about they did not crucify Jesus has something to do with his previous experience, something to do with that, because it's odd that we have in his own story someone being crucified, and actually somebody that is dead. I just found it a little bit out of place, instead of just saying, they burned him or something, but never mind. But the whole thing about the 7 jars. So in the Quran, this is actually from the version that, one of the versions that I use the most. For most people, it will not be verse 31, it will be verse 30. But we have this parallel of they have taken their rabbis and monks as lords besides Allah and the Messiah and so on. And verse 34 or 33, depending on the version people are reading, it will say, many of the rabbis and the monks devour the wealth of people unjustly and avert from the way of God. and those who hoard gold and silver and spend it in other ways. It's like if you put these things together, you realize that Solomon is the one speaking these verses. He's the one that says these sort of things. His own experiences, hoarding literally gold and silver, that is, he's saying these things in the Quran. He's also telling this, well, not in the Quran, he's just telling people that they obviously write them down, and at one point in the future they become the Quran. But he's telling those stories. That same story ends up on the one hand in the Quran, perhaps in a more poetic manner, and on the other one is him telling the stories. And just to add there, this is from Saint Murad. I found it actually odd when I was actually working on that one, that it says that these people, they took their rabbis and their monks as lords apart from Allah plus the Messiah. This is, and then it says there is only one God. They have to serve one God. What I'm reading there, and I think it's very clear in the very clear Arabic, is that when this guy spoke the words to that particular crowd in whichever city he was telling them that Allah and the Messiah are their lords and they are one. But the story actually changes. That's why in the Quran you have that Jesus received signs, but also he received a book, and also he didn't die, but also he did die. It's almost like he's telling different stories to different people in different places, and we will see that. But I think this is the verse that nails this guy. We have people were telling the stories of him having that experience, and that's directly right there in the Quran, and actually in the last surah to be revealed, which is fun. And by the way, Google Translate actually agrees. So, any thoughts about that?
Just a comment from Villainous.
Just a precision. In Surah 9, verse 30, it's about the Jews and about the Nazarenes. The Nazarenes are supposed to have taken the scholars and monks as lords beside God, plus the Messiah. So again, we come across the Nazarenes. Who are the Nazarenes? That's the question.
Villainous asks, is Salman the Parsi, which Salman the Persian, could he be Solomon the Pharisee?
I saw that actually on one of the videos from Mel at Islamic Origins, and it's a very good case. It's possible as well, but basically what I'm trying to do is from the stories of Islam to actually get those same stories and say, okay, are these stories anywhere in the Quran and these sort of things to match them? Other parts of his backstory that is outside of the life of Muhammad and al-Tabari and all of those things is like, yeah, possible, but it takes me too far away from trying to pin this guy and Umar to them being the original inspiration for the Mahmad that goes, builds the temple, and starts a heresy that has worked so well for the world. I'm going to skip this because just for anyone who wants to actually freeze this, there are many hadiths that are those kind of hadiths that talk about Muhammad being kind of like nice and being pious. So if anyone wants to see them, now if you read them thinking, could this be actually talking about Salman, and then they just change the name, you might actually get the answer, and the answer being, yeah, that actually makes sense. Because then we have one hadith like this one from actually narrated by Umar, which is interesting. And it says, do not exaggerate in praising me, being the prophet, as the Christians praise the Son of Mary, for I am only a slave, so call me a slave of Allah. And it's like, okay, if we know anything about the arc of Muhammad, is he wants to be praised. He wants the money, he wants the booty, he wants the women, he wants the land. People worship him to this day. They commit shirk every single day. They are praying to him. That hadith makes absolutely no sense of the Prophet saying, don't exaggerate in praising me. If there's one thing that we know about the whole arc of Muhammad is he wants to be praised. It's almost like we're talking about two different individuals, one who is quite pious and one who is the warlord. And I think we have both of them right on that hadith. Would you agree with that reading of this?
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting. We start to understand that Muhammad, as the prophet of Islam, is a composite figure with many different characters having been merged, or and the prophet of Islam is a sort of fabrication from maybe historical figures, but it's a complete fabrication.
We can also interpret this in a different way, because some of these words have meanings that we are not familiar with in the English language or in the Western culture. Remember, I mentioned the ilm al-badi, the science of rhetoric, of prettifying language. The word exaggerate in Islam has a very specific meaning. It's like a, legal terms that we use on a casual basis, but in law they have a specific defined meaning when applied in a court or in a document, right? So the idea of exaggeration, they have this idea called mubalaga in Islam, right? So it's used to denote the intensive meaning of a word, and it's applied to the intensive participles of the forms, and in literary theory and so on, and to denote a very specialized type of emphasizing the meaning we want here, a very specialized type of emphasizing, right, in which a poetic idea is rounded out by a pertinent little exaggeration at the end of the line. Okay, that's one idea. Let me just find it again. So it's a particular poetic style or a particular prose style, right? And then of course you get, from a negative point of view, there's what they call extremists who are accused of exaggeration, and these extremists are also associated with the Shia, who exaggerate their religion. So that's one meaning. But what if he's saying, do not exaggerate in praising me the way the Christians praise the Son of Mary, for I'm only a slave? He's saying, look, I admit, yes, I am the slave of Allah and his apostle, but don't embellish me. Just speak of me humbly. He could well be saying that. He's not denying it. He's just saying, yes, I am, for sure. I am the Muhammad, but just speak about me in humble terms.
Praise me, but not too much.
Yeah, praise me, but not too much. Exactly. Because this would be very consistent. You can easily make this as the translation here.
Yeah, because we don't press me too high. Just give me all of your money, all of your land, all of your women.
Yeah.
Right. So a few parallels with these two guys that I think could have influenced that is, well, Salman doesn't have any siblings. He doesn't have any parents around in that region. They are both, the stories of both of them are linked to Christian monks in one place, in another place, and all of that. They have links to Syria. Some of the stories are described as pious. They both have obviously the links to prophethood, and the life of Muhammad actually explains that as well in more detail. They're both described as scouts in a number of places, and maybe we'll cover that in a minute. I have to speed run through things I think we really want to get through Salman and Umar, because like this, everything is with a nice, we tie everything up with a nice bow. This guy had one wife, and we have the arc of Muhammad having first one wife, and being very nice and Alamin and all of that, and then having all of those wives and sex slaves and stuff. And it's like, well, explanation one, it was not Jibril, it was Satan. Explanation two, we're talking about two different people giving that story, because you don't just change that much just because you reach 40. They're the same age, by the way, both of them, and they both have no idea about the afterlife. In different hadiths explains that. And Yeshua warning that if this guy was a Zoroastrian to begin with, he prays 5 times. That is actually not in the hadith, in the Quran. So I think that may be the reason why they're praying 5 times a day when it's not even in their book. And
there's another thing about Salman that connects him to Muhammad. In the Islamic literature, he's supposed to be a member of the Ahl al-Bayt, the people of the temple. Bayt is temple, or the household of Muhammad, according to the Islamic narrative. So he is also linked, this Salman al-Farisi, with the temple. I think it refers to the temple in Jerusalem.
Actually, I haven't seen that, but that's actually great. The temple during the time of Umar it was called like that, like Bait something. So the temple or the Holy Temple, something of the sort. So that would actually link the two of them with that. And there is other things as well in Al-Tabari, which I didn't understand. They call him like a member of the house or something like that, even though he was in theory first a slave and then he becomes one of the companions, which of course I don't think that any of that happened. But that's actually a very good point. And and I think that links him as well to what happened in Jerusalem and him having the knowledge in all of this. Now, during his say warrior days, there are a number of things. He's described as being a scout. This actually happens in quite a few places in Al-Tabari again and again. But then he also leads people. Like at one point, he starts to lead people, particularly into like Iraq and those sort of areas, telling people, join us, pay us, or we kill you, the usual thing. Then at one point he's like crossing a river. This is actually recorded in the book of history. Like he's crossing a river, and people are following him, and things like that. He's described again in there in another section as a scout. He was responsible as well for the call to prayers, but that applies to everyone in Islamic history. So never mind that. He's also described as, according to Al-Tabari, look, one of the most popular figures in Muslim legend. Oh, good. So they call him as part of a legend. So it's no longer history, it's a legend. I love it. And that's what we're trying to unpick. And because of he was an ardent supporter of Ali, he's actually quite important in the Shia traditions as well, in creating the whole thing. But I didn't check the Shia traditions because I really don't care. Now, a couple of other things is the Battle of the Trench, which we've all heard about. Do you guys know who had the idea of doing that trench for the Battle of the Trench?
Salman. Salman, of course.
Yeah, and don't you find that kind of interesting? I mean, in the old days, you knew that if you were in a defensive position, the first thing that you do is you entrench yourself. But the idea came from this guy, and one of the battles that has that name, Battle of the Trench. And when you ask the trench, oh yeah, that was Salman, and he's like, yeah, man, like this guy was the prophet. Yeah.
Owen Robertson. Apologies for the interruption, but I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. Owen Robertson. She says John of Damascus made no mention of warrior kings, caravan robbing, executions, or wives. And Saint Murad removes the sin from the Quran and does not find words for spoil of war, battle of Badr, revelation, or wife.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fantastic comment. Thank you. That is amazing. And thank you for the donation. That is very generous. But yeah, that's a very, I mean, someone just joined the dots there. That is incredible. Your thoughts on that, Odon?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I don't fully agree with everything Murad writes in his translation, because words might have different meanings in Aramaic also, but I fully agree that the Battle of Badr is a complete fabrication. Same as the Battle of the Trench, I think so also. But yeah, it's a very interesting coincidence. And I think it's not a coincidence. It's there's something here.
There was another thing that from Saint Murad that he said that he has removed that specific word, and I can't remember now, but I thought, wow, I have to kind of revise absolutely everything because this is going to change like lots of things. From his translation, yes, there are lots of things that really change absolutely everything, and is going to be a game changer. In terms of Badr, which we know that Badr is not a battle but a place, and that was actually the next one that I actually had there, because I think there are different stories about the Battle of Badr. One of them from Yasser Qadi, he has it there. It's about 15-hour videos, like all of them put together. And if you have excessive alcohol at home and you want to get rid of it, watch that series and the alcohol will deplete very quickly. 15 hours talking about a battle that should be explained in 2 minutes. But the odd thing is Salman is not in that battle, but before the battle, on the eve of battle, Muhammad, and in here it says one of the companions, I think it's Abu Bakr, they go on a scouting mission, and they actually encounter another guy who says, hey, where are you from? And then, Muhammad gets all of the information from the other guy, he tricks him, and then he runs away. Now, why would you ever, on the eve of battle, if you are the most important person in the whole army, with the second most important, go out to scout? You don't do that. Who was the scout? That was Salman. The guy that asked the question from the other army was like, which side are you from? There are different stories. Like, where do you come from? It's like, if the guy that they saw was Mohammed, he was supposed to be from Mecca. He would speak the same dialect. They would know exactly who he was. The Mohammed that they encountered before that battle would have been the typical scout. That would have been Salman, the guy that is Persian. He looks different, he has different accent, and it will confuse the other guy. Also, I do have a feeling that the Battle of the Trench and the Battle of Badr is exactly the same battle that happened wherever it is. So we're not talking about two different battles, but just one battle that has been split into two, but because of strategic reasons. The strategy of the, particularly the Battle of Badr, makes zero sense. But maybe that's something that we can talk about in the future if you guys are interested. But yeah, the typical scout, Battle of Badr, Mohammed is the scout that gets all of that information. So I'm pretty sure it was him. So Umar, he has quite a few things in parallel with the Mohammed who never existed. Well, born in Mecca, died in Yathrib. Now, I can think of another person who was born in Mecca and died in Yathrib. The thing is, nobody cares if that was the case. Even if Umar happened to be, a guy from the Lahnets or from Merv or a Chinese, those things that don't matter. What matters is that they have carried that information themselves, and they happen to be like from the same cities. But also, Umar is the one that institutes the calendar. And by the way, the calendar of the Christians is based on the birth of Jesus. Their calendar, if it was something to do with Islam, he should have done either the birth or maybe the death of Muhammad. But he chooses that weird Hijra thing. It's like that date was important to him. Otherwise, he would have chosen a religious, say, date. This guy stamps documents. He assembled people to one imam. That's all on the screen from that extract, which you would have thought it would have been the prophet who assembled people to one imam. And the most hilarious one, according to al-Tabari, he appoints two public Quranic readers, one for men, one for women. Well done. I mean, they don't have the book. They haven't done the canonization. This is before Uthman. And what are they reading? Like the codices from the Sahaba. It's like it doesn't make any sense. But that one is attached to this guy, him and Quran. And then we have that story as well, very weird, which is, again, Umar and Salman. They are speaking, and this is in al-Tabari. Umar asking Salman, am I a king or a caliph? And Salman says, you're a piece of garbage, man. And the guy starts crying, okay? That's weird. That's very weird. Why would you have that in al-Tabari? Why would Umar be asking Salman something like, am I a king or a caliph? It's like, makes no sense. Now,
so Salman had the power to tell the caliph, Umar, the Rashidun caliph, the rightly guided companion of Muhammad, where to get off.
He was like what, moral support, like an advisor, almost. He was obviously, he had many roles according to their own stories, but it seems like they go to him because he's almost like a wise man or something of the sort, or at least that's what I get.
Okay, from so an advisor of some type, right?
Yeah. So he was the one with all of the religious stories. So I suppose it makes sense. Yeah, the vizier. He was maybe the first one. So if Muhammad and Abu Bakr didn't exist and we don't have any records for them, then everything falls to Umar and people after. According to al-Tabari, there are many, many accounts of this, but who was the first person to believe in the messenger? So, and you have Ali, Abu Bakr, who was Ali, and then Ali, and then Ali, and then Ali. So it's normally Ali. If you don't have Muhammad and Abu Bakr, everything then falls on the laps of Umar, who is the first one to actually go into battle with this guy. And it would have been Ali, who is Abu Turab, whoever that person actually, who he was. And recap on John of Damascus. Oh, I like that this slide. So Muhammad had a friend named Zayd. So he gets it wrong, not adopted son, and he says, God wants you to divorce your wife. God wants me to marry your wife. That's the kind of person you really want around. And then this weird thing, this is from John of Damascus, and it happens straight after. Furthermore, if a brother puts away his wife, let his brother marry her, should he so wish. That is very weird. Well, Umar was married to a Zainab, but that's fine because it was a very common name. He had a brother called Zaid. There is no records that I could find that Zaid was married to Zainab, but we're trying to find parallels between the stories that we know about Muhammad and the stories that we know about Umar. And they're just stories. None of it has to be real, but Muslims would have been telling these stories and they would have diverged into the two different paths. But the interesting thing is this one. Another of his wives, of Umar's wives, was the daughter of Ali. She was still a child. When she was still a child, he asked for her hand in marriage, which was resisted by Ali. Now, we have all heard the story a million times about Muhammad wanting to marry Aisha, Abu Bakr not being very happy with it. She was still a child. I don't know if anybody's getting a weird case of deja vu right now, because I am. And more details on that. So he asked her hand in marriage during his reign, 634 to 644. It's very possible that this guy, and I really think that Umar might have been even the caliph from much earlier, but this is the stories that they've been telling. So we're playing with their stories. 634 to 644 is what they have been telling us. She was still a child. The thing is, if they actually then got married, like 1 year after he became the caliph, according to this, they would have been married for 9 years. Once again, exactly the same as the story of Muhammad and Aisha, the daughter of the would-be caliph. And he would have been 52 years old at the time. The story, I don't know if it was a very common thing at the time, that every single caliph, or let's say every single king, would marry the child daughter of a future king for a period of 9 years before he gets murdered. Maybe it was a common thing. I just find that this is a parallel that created the whole myth of Muhammad, because it's just too many things, and including the being a child.
And they would try to create a template based on a factual precedent, so it helps them because they don't have to invent it out of whole cloth. They can simply use something that's real within their environment, which they can modify.
Yeah, it's impossible to create something from scratch unless you actually start talking about dragons or something like that. If you're trying to create a story, you would have to create it from an actual real story. And that is actually assuming that there is no foul play. That I'm actually just assuming that they really heard these stories and they were trying to put them together in good faith, which most likely it wasn't. But even if we assume that there was good faith, the stories came from someplace. And I think this one here is like, come on, like the parallel is just too ridiculous.
In the Hadiths, Muhammad wants to marry Aisha, and her father, Umar, says he's not happy with that. And here you've got Umar ibn al-Khattab asked for hand in marriage, which was resisted by Kulthum and her father Ali. So you've got a very similar parallel in the Hadiths as well.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's the same story. It has to come from someplace. And I think this one was the original story. And then on the one hand, it goes down as the real story. And on the other one, it evolves into Muhammad. And we're going to see then other things. In this one, well, they're both son-in-laws, but everybody was pretty much inbred in a village, so nobody cares. But then there is this one, which is weird. I said before, in the story of Salman, I was there to his father rather than the whole world. So he, Salman, was there to his father than the whole world. Then we have like a hadith like this of Umar saying to the Prophet, now you are dearer to me than my own self. And it's like, come on, I mean, maybe just literary thing. This argument is naive, but there is that parallel. And the same with this one. We showed the slide with that extract when I said
No, but that's
some
in the
person agree
Sharia,
with-
that the prophet has to be dearer to you. That's actually in the Sharia. Muhammad must be dearer to you. You must love Muhammad more than you love your mother, your father, your wife, your sister, your brother, even your own life, even yourself. You have to love Muhammad with your whole heart above anything and everything else in the world. So this
And that-
hadith.
Yeah, and doesn't that then when you read that I was dearer to him than the whole world, that almost same words that you have just said about the most important thing happen to be attached to the story of Salman?
Yeah,
It's
by
just
him in whose Salman's soul lies. That's a parallel of what Muhammad says.
yeah. So in that same hadith, that says this thing that about being more important than anything else, says the like word for word like the same, but of course it's a translation and artistic license, and maybe it was a very common thing. I just found it odd that by him in whose hands Salman's soul lies, and on the other one is the prophet saying, by him in whose hands my soul is. It's like, come on, this is Salman using his favorite sentence, left, right, and center. I found that I just left it there. Umar narrating that alcohol is made of things. I don't know why you have a hadith of one guy saying that alcohol is made from things. Why would you have that? I thought the hadiths are supposed to be the sayings of the Prophet, not a saying of Umar saying alcoholic drinks come from 5 things. It's like, Umar, nobody cares. We're here for the Prophet. And this other narration, if you look at the hadiths from Umar, you're going to start seeing what is going on. Umar narrating the Prophet saying that if he lived, he would expel the Christians and the Jews from the Arabian Peninsula. And it's like, no, Umar, that wasn't the Prophet. That was you. The guys who wrote the hadith said that he was the Prophet, but that was just you. So there are other parallels, like narrated by him, like a couple of things there. That one is not very important, but the next one is, so narrated by Umar, a man will not be asked as to why he beat his wife. What a lovely guy. In that section that we saw before, the alleged marriage to the little girl, Ali didn't want him to marry her because of his reputation for harsh treatment of women. And then another one, Umar says, blah, 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 and a verse is revealed in the Quran. And another one, Umar says, blah, 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 and a verse is revealed. That means that Umar was a real prophet. He knew what Allah was going to reveal before Allah revealed it. What a guy. But this is almost like the one that I think simply just nails him, which is, this is the extract just from Prophet ChatGPT, peace be upon him. The hadith mentioning that Allah agreed with Umar in 3 matters. And actually, ChatGPT said, actually, sometimes it says more, appears in several collections. So let's have a look. Hijab. The reason why women wear hijab this day is because Umar opened his mouth and then a verse was revealed. That's a bit of a coincidence. Captives of Badr. The Prophet wanted to be lenient with the captives, and Umar wanted to kill them. So he opened his mouth, and then Allah reveals, kill them all. So the reason why in Muslim countries they do lots of executions, it also comes to the words of Umar. Very importantly, he's the one that said, hey, maybe we should pray in one direction instead of creating a church or something of the sort that has
they even
no
call it the
direction.
Pact of Umar for the Demis and Jizya.
Pardon?
They even call it the Pact of Umar to describe the whole contract with Demis and Jizya.
It seems like he just, and you know what? I never hear people talking about Umar. And now that I'm doing a lot of research into him, it's like this guy did everything. Like he was about everything. He was everywhere. But so this final thing, the direction of prayer, to this day, they are praying in one direction. The first masjids, they were not, say, like a church that doesn't have a direction. it was commanded that they would pray in one direction. That, of course, now they get it wrong because it was Petra. But the idea of praying in one direction, it was him. He says that. And then, as if by magic, it appears in the Quran. And then now when we read that verse from the Quran about that you can strike your wives, does it now look like, was it Salman? Was it Jesus? Or was it Umar? And the one about, if he divorced you all, Allah might give him better wives. Well, maybe Umar, if you don't beat your wives to death, they might actually not make your life difficult. So we see Umar saying things, and then those things appear in the Quran, which of course is simply this guy saying things to the crowd. There is no Quran, there is no such thing. And then years later, people are, writing things that have happened, and they are attaching those stories to the Muhammad. And it is Muhammad who says, we are praying in that direction because of the Quran. And it's like, no, you're praying in that direction because Umar said it. So all of these things, and I think, which one was the next? Oh, yeah. So we're pretty much done with Umar, but I think it is this guy who, he's the one creating Quran. He and Salman, we have these sections. Anything violent, well, hijab, the prayer, strike them and divorce them. It was all about him, and we've pretty much ignored him. Or at least that's what I think, and I feel quite strongly about it, because he built Quran according to their own sources. What do you guys think?
Can I go on? There's something of a pattern here, for sure. But the thing is that almost for every example you took, it's not historical. If I take the example of the station of Abraham, Umar suggests that it would be good if the Muslim took the station of Abraham, the standing place of Abraham near the Kaaba, as a place of prayer. This is a complete fabrication. For example, it's the standing place of Abraham is in Jerusalem. There was nothing of the sort in Mecca. It's a complete invention. But the thing that's very interesting here.
So sorry, but just to add that the thing is that none of these stories had to be correct in any possible
Exactly,
manner.
that's my point.
The thing is
that's my point. Yeah. You have to go beyond the correctness of the story to recognize the pattern. And the pattern is that Umar was influential in the making of the Quran. Somehow he was. And it is very interesting what you have uncovered here. I have other things in mind about Umar. In the Islamic literature, it is also said that he might have come from Syria. Might be a Syrian connection, mostly due to his name. Ibn al-Khattab is a very strange name, and it's very close to Hatab. Hatab meaning lumberjack. And there are traditions, Islamic traditions, about his father, so al-Hatab or al-Khattab, having been a lumberjack in Mecca, which is complete nonsense, since there are no forests in the region of Mecca. But there are forests in Syria, and it might be another clue for the identity of Umar. And there's another thing that we discussed before going live. It's Umar's nickname. According to the Islamic narrative, he was nicknamed by Muhammad al-Faruq. Al-Faruq meaning the savior, the one who separates good from evil, the one who judges good from evil, which is a messianic title also. It comes from Aramaic, and it was given to Jesus. Jesus is al-Faruq. It's the same root as al-Furqan, the criterion. The Furqan is also a way of understanding that there is something that separates good from evil. So Umar is also a sort of messianic figure, a messianic character. like Ali, like Salman, like many, not so many, but some people in the narrative about early Islam.
The the connection with the north, particularly if they were Syrians, one of the things I would be very happy with that, because the Damascus becomes the capital like quite early on by the time that we get to the Umayyads. So it's possible that all of these people, they were actually always from there. It then went south, do the whole sweep to create their empire, basically unifying their taking advantage of the Persians being weakened, and they always remained in there. And the whole thing about no Medina, Mecca is like Mecca didn't exist. You guys had one well. You can probably support like 3 guys and a donkey. That's about it. So, but I did have like other slides, and it was about more of the theory of how I think things could have moved. And you've seen actually the slides, but we obviously don't have time for that. We're nearly on the 2-hour mark. I'm just going to finish with this final, almost like closing remarks. So who was Muhammad? Was it Salman or Jesus? Umar, Ali? Maybe Muhammad Al-Amin. That's actually a caliph from the Abbasids called that. Maybe some imams, Abdul Malik, or other companions. And the answer is yes, just a whole mess, like we all know. Everybody just put together. A little bit like James Bond, having one character that we know, but then there are lots of different people, or perhaps more like Doctor Who. Or the favorite example is a Jackson Pollock's style of religion. So we have a lot of people, lots of influences. They don't have a character, so it's just a blank canvas. So they just have to throw everything into it, and then you end up with basically a soup. Like Lloyd always says, it's a soup, and it really is. And the reason is because there isn't one character that you have just copied and said things about his story. That's why his story doesn't make any sense. And when people analyze the character of Muhammad, say, well, he was crazy. And it's like, no, it's like having multiple personality disorder. It's like you have 20 people in one. So by putting all of those stories together, you end up some historical, some not historical. You end up with Muhammad, and you end up with a standard Islamic narrative, which has many holes in it. And probably I will just stop there before going on the other slides. I don't know how to stop sharing.
Oh, that's very good.
If you would be so kind as to help me stop sharing, please. Oh, thank you very much. So, yeah, or rather, to conclude, I think, yes, like we all know that Muhammad was many, many, many people and stories from all over the place. But it does seem like the guys that started pretty much the whole thing might have been actually these two. We have it at least on good authority from Leo III. And before that time, if he actually became the caliph in the year 634, before that time, maybe he was the caliph actually for longer, because all of the information that we get is from the standard Islamic narrative. Or there would have been other guys. Sorry?
So now we've got some early sources pre-Uthman who may well be influential in creating the narrative of the Quran.
Pre-Uthman. I think, and that was something like I was going to discuss on other slides, that these guys, I think the reason why there are so many contradictions is many reasons, and obviously it takes hundreds of years and there are changes, but it's the whole concept of Tawhid. I think these guys are walking around, they are telling people, join my army or we kill you, and they use anything that they can. Either it's extortion, deals, being good cop, bad cop, and some of them is just stories. So if you are licking a stone, they tell you, hey, don't worry, you're not a pagan. You're licking a stone, that is because you worship the one God that sent you the stone. We are friends. Join my army.
That's what I was saying the last couple of weeks, you might recall. I know you've got about a dozen slides or so to finish, so shall we maybe make a date for a week from now and finish this? Because, I mean, this is interesting as to how the story got started, how they found parallels, turned them into the sin. Yeah, I mean, this, you know, because it's not like 1 + 1 is equal to 2, you can't judge it on those criteria. Because we're trying to think, how do liars tell lies? How do they tell credible lies? How do they construct a narrative that's based on things you know, but with a little bit of new. We know they exaggerate. We know that they embellish. We know that they're basing it on stuff you already know. You know, they're trying to be original without being overly plagiaristic. You know, and so yeah, we can see. I mean, these character parallels, these historical parallels. It's there's too many of them to be coincidental, I think.
And there are many other coincidences that JC did not address. We did not talk about Ali, for example. Ali's figure is also very messianic, very Muhammad-like, and you put him among the different people that were merged to form the prophets of Islam. But in the Shia Muslim tradition, he is said to have claimed to be Jesus himself.
Wow.
To have been the second coming of Jesus. Jesus as his second coming. So he would have descended from the heavens. So you see also a parallel with Isra and Miraj. Is someone who visited the heavens, who came back from the heavens, pretending to be Jesus, pretending to be what's the word? The parousia.
Parousia.
Parousia. And it's within the Shia tradition, which is very little known in the West. But luckily, here in France, we have a very interesting scholar, Mohammad Ali Amir Moedzi, who is from Iranian extraction, and he wrote many things about the things we can gather from the Shia tradition. He's a very interesting scholar. There are some videos of him in English that you can find on YouTube. Mohammad Ali Amir Moedzi. And there's another thing I would like to add. This is a very good presentation, JC. I'm impressed because you took different paths from mine, but in the end, I think we really converge. When you put Muhammad as a composite figure out of different characters, Salman and so on, I think there's also a very important component in the making of Muhammad, which is the whole plugger, all the things that had to be invented about the Muhammad in order to correct the incoherencies, to plug the holes in the narrative. There are many things about Muhammad in the Islamic tradition that are told only to correct discrepancies, incoherencies, and so on. I just take one example. There is this bizarre thing about the satanic verses. You know the story. In Al-Tabari, there is a mention that in Surah 53, verse 19-20, there were parts that were edited out. And those parts were about Muhammad urging his audience to praise polytheistic divinities. And thereafter, I think it happened afterwards, we have many hadiths where Muhammad prohibits his audience from worshipping these very same deities, Al-Lat, Al-Manat, Al-Uzza. And these hadiths were invented to plug the hole, to plug the plot hole, to correct the incoherencies. And this is a very big part, I think, in the making of Muhammad. There are historical influences, and there is the constraints of the fabrication of the narrative.
Yeah, so lots of things that were done in good conscience, with good intention, and then when they realized that the whole thing didn't make any sense, you had lots of people saying, okay, now we really have to fudge the whole thing to make the square fit into the circle, and we get Islam.
That's the thing.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah. So the last few slides, the last 10 or so slides, shall we tackle that at a later date? We'll plan for that.
I'm up for
JC?
it.
Yeah, for me, certainly. I will just try to put them in a different order so that we can pick it up in an easy way. And it will be more about how I think the moves happen with these people. But yes, whenever you guys are free, let me know, and then we can make it happen. And thank you both very much for being so kind, especially for not destroying me through the presentation and actually being very supportive and kind with your words. Supposed to say, no, that's a no, that's a no, that's a no. So thank you very much for being so
Yeah,
patient
no,
and
praise me,
understanding.
but not too much.
Yeah.
Do not exaggerate in your praising.
Do not exaggerate in your praise. Be praiseful, but not exaggerating. Yes, exactly.
All
I think
hand
that's
to
the
Allah.
thing. So in which case he is Muhammad. If we interpret it that way, and there's every reason why it can be, then he is Muhammad.
Indeed.
Yeah. So guys, thank you all very much. Then thanks for this. We've hit the 2-hour mark, and I obviously try not to go too long. I mean, I know many channels do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. I know. I'm not sure. Adam Seeker contacted me yesterday, asked me to do some research for him on the word hunafa, and I sent him a whole bunch of references and stuff. And so he goes on several hours with streams. So who knows? He actually asked me to do a stream with him one time recently, and except it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I'd love to, but it's not really a suitable time. So let's hope we can arrange a different time. So guys, thanks all. Thank you for that, JC. That was very interesting. Definitely
Thanks,
strong food for thought. Odon said it was impressive. Odon has not said that about anything I've done. So
Ouch.
I'm feeling very hurt that I wasn't getting any praise at all. That's I'm gonna have to work.
You want some praising? You're so humble. Lloyd.
What's that?
You are so humble.
Yeah, I am, and it's to my detriment, I know. But okay, well, anyway, so guys, thanks all very much, and to the audience for the 130 of you at least, I think that we hear that's really great, and we shall see you all soon. We'll come back to this topic, and please leave your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what you think of this, and of course, please share it far and wide. And thank you for all the donations, always much appreciated. Thanks, guys. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, so that's a wrap. I hope that you have actually enjoyed that. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think about Salman al-Farisi and Umar. Do you think that they were real characters in history and they were doing important stuff, and somehow some of their stories made it into the canon of Muhammad? Do you think that Salman al-Farisi was in fact a Pharisee, and the name, didn't actually change because the Persian and the Pharisee is exactly the same word in the old language? Do you think that that person went through all of those changes in religions, or that he was just one of the people who created the Quran, just as Leo III said, as we saw as well in some previous shows? So let me know what you think. If there are any other important characters in the stories of Islam that you think you find stories of those people then being copied into the story of Muhammad, please let me know. I will be very, very interested to look at those sources. For now, I will leave you here. I hope that you've had a good time. I hope you have a very good week ahead, and we will see you soon. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie! 26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
As promised, I will give you more than 20 reasons why I left Islam in this video.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?